It is Friday, June 13th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Magic the Gathering episode of LTPS. Yet again, very busy week. We are right in the middle of all this game news going on. So we have Summer Game Fest, the Xbox Game Showcase, the DS2 premiere event, the Konami Livestream. We've also got more rumors heating up for this PlayStation 5, 6-esque portable, which is really starting to be quite plausible. And we'll get to all that stuff. But first, as always, a very brief reminder for the PS Plus Essential June lineup. So if you have not just yet claimed those games, and also we have the PS Plus Extra and Premium June lineup announced as well, going live this coming Tuesday on the 17th. And for PS Plus Extra, yet again, less than 10 games. It seems fairly consistent the last year or so that PS Plus Extra, as far as quantity, has been kind of low, but we do have another day one launch, so that is FBC Firebreak, which is Remedy's Control Universe style multiplayer game with objects of power and a whole thing going on there. I will try that game out, even though I'm generally not much of a multiplayer person, but I do like that universe a great deal. So you've got that. You've got Battlefield 2042, which I believe was a monthly game at one point, so you might have that in your library already. You've got We Love Katamari Reroll plus Royal Reverie, and you all know I am always just throwing that franchise down your throats. I love that game dearly, every entry of Katamari, so if you've not played Katamari, then here is your chance. That is the second one that showed up on PS2 back in the day, has a modern PS4 port, PS4, PS5 port, but still, there's that. Train Sim World 5, I know, is a game with a ton of trophies, so good luck with that one. And then you've also got Endless Dungeon for Extra as well. Going into Premium, though, only one title, that is Deus Ex, which we learned from the State of Play. I was really hoping we'd have more than just that, but unfortunately that too is something where we're getting less games in that category, which was only 2 to 3 games usually. Now it's like one or two, or in some cases they will just throw out 3 in one particular franchise, like we saw for the Time Splitter series, for example. But if we suspect that this will be similar to July and August for Twisted Metal 3 and 4, and then RE2 and 3, that means those are the only games we're getting for those months as well, which is pretty bogus. But I will say Deus Ex, a very transformative experience, a really important game for its time. So if you've never had the chance to check it out and see what it's all about, it's really awesome to have that game now playable on modern hardware. Anyway, moving on to our first news story. Sony confirmed a new update for the DualSense controller is coming later this year that will finally let you pair it to multiple devices. Now, I think the way that this is being read is that you won't have to resync it to a new device whenever you're, say, moving your DualSense between 2 different PS5s or between your PC or something like that, which I think would be fantastic, given that, well, for me, like, I run into this issue a lot of whether it's for videos or I've got a console downstairs, I am almost always like moving controllers around, and ever since the PS3 days, that's always a huge pain because it only remembers the last console it was manually synced to, which is always via cable first, then you can use it wirelessly. So if you try to use a controller on a different system, you have to reconnect via cable, just kind of a pain. In theory, the way this sounds is that a controller is now going to remember multiple different devices that you've synced to. Maybe it'll only have to, like, you can remotely boot up the last console that it was used on, but otherwise you won't have to use that cable if you want to use it on a different PC or a different PlayStation. So that, I think, is excellent, and great to know that's coming at some point later this year. I'm not sure why they chose to do that via a tweet, too. Almost always you think that's something they announce on the PlayStation blog, but just kind of goes into that growing notion of Sony just doing things that are hard to predict nowadays. Moving on to some not so good news for Bend Studio. Initially, we heard this from Jason Schreier, writing for Bloomberg, and then confirmed by the studio themselves, but they did recently have a 30% reduction in staff. About 40-something people were laid off, and this is off the back of them canceling their live service game earlier this year, or rather Sony was doing that, and then them also shipping Days Gone Remastered most recently. But we do know as of right now they are spinning up a new project, but they did see a reduction in staff, which is unfortunate. I will say this is not surprising even a little bit to me, in that, if you recall, this was a genuine concern I had when their live service game was canceled. it kind of goes back to that conversation we tend to have about when these remaster projects are being announced. Why are they touching this game? Why are they doing this remaster? It doesn't need it, this, that, and the fourth. You know, whether it's an onboarding process or it does give the studio something to do, they do tend to serve a purpose. They generate revenue for the studio. It can be great for onboarding, but it also does give them something for staff to do. When you talk about a studio that has 120 to 30, 40 plus people and they're starting up a new project, not everybody can work on that particular project. Ben, for the most part, is kind of a one major game studio. So you've still got a lot of staff that in the interim could have been working on this particular Days Gone remastered project. But if you remember, my concern was, okay, they shipped that game, this live service title is canceled, you've got a lot of people sitting around doing nothing. So I don't want to say like, oh, this was inevitable, but like that was my concern, is you've got a lot of people that will have nothing to do. I don't know if like there was a path here where SI could have assigned a large portion of the staff to something else while they spin up a new project, and then they can funnel those people back in, because that's the other thing too. If Ben starts working on something, they settle on a project after, you know, coming up with a vertical slice, whatever the case is, and they start ramping up pre-production on this game and then going into full production, they will need that staff hired back. So that's the unfortunate cyclical thing with developing games. It sucks, and it's bad news, but otherwise I can't say I'm surprised about this. It's just enlightening to know that, okay, Ben can be working on something new again. It's just, the concern definitely does become, man, it sucks that it's been so long since Ben has put out something new and original, and it's going to be a long time until we see something new from them, because they've got the clock reset on them yet again. And maybe they will feel more inclined to pitch something that is a little bit more safe, and they know will probably hit all these milestones and eventually come out. If that's Days Gone 2, I do not know. Arguably, maybe that is the safe option nowadays. I don't know if that's what Ben's staff really want to do, but it's just something to consider. Next up, the massive gaming conglomerate Tencent has acquired 15% in Arrowhead Game Studios for about $80 million, about 15.75% to be exact, for $80 million. So that brings Arrowhead's valuation to about $532 million. But the Arrowhead co-founder, Johan Pielstedt, did say this opens up opportunities for China as a market. Gaining access to the Chinese player base is what he calls, quote, the holy grail in the gaming industry. So that's where Arrowhead stands right now. They did sell off a piece of the company to Tencent, probably in the interest of their next project, considering we did just talk about Arrowhead in the context of they have enough money and they want to self-publish and self-fund into their next game, which is a luxury not many game studios have nowadays. I would think that in this context of why they're willing to sell a portion of the company to Tencent is very much for that. They want to be able to ship something that has even larger mass market global appeal, and certainly trying to capture that audience in China when we're talking about a PC release, which I think is very much on the cards for Arrowhead's next game. So there's not really much else here to say outside of, I would think this is very much their play going into their next title, and it doesn't really represent anything going on with Helldivers 2. Okay, let's get into all these summer gaming live streams going on, with the most recent one being the Konami Press Start live stream, where there's two big key takeaways here. Bloober team, which we already knew from their press releases, they kind of telegraphed this, that they're still working with Konami for another IP, and they're remaking it. And yes, it is indeed Silent Hill 1. So that is confirmed. The 1999 PS1 release, they were given the keys to remake this game. So there's that. And then also MGS Snake Eater, or MGS Delta Snake Eater, the Fox Hunt online mode got a formal announcement, which they do clarify this is not MGO. So that was the tease at the end of that trailer during the state of play, but it's not MGO. It will be its own thing where you're using a lot of camouflage and hide and seek. It looks kind of similar to, I guess, Prop Hunt in a way, because they really go out of their way to explain, like, oh, the online environment nowadays and the sort of of multiplayer gameplay loop is much different from when MGO came out all those years ago. So they do kind of prop this up as a very different kind of experience, which I think for many was maybe a bit disappointing, just in that it seemed really exciting for them to also remake MGO when this entire time for the MGS Snake Eater news cycle, they had not said anything about the multiplayer mode. We all assumed it was simply single player. So it's not MGO, but it does still look interesting enough. They're also making it seem like maybe it won't be ready in time for the August release, so it might come down the road or something, but they will give more info on that at some point. But otherwise, those are the two big things from the Konami live stream. Silent Hill 1 would be really fascinating to see for sure. It's always kind of a slightly nerve-wracking thing, even though they did well with Silent Hill 2, but it's just always a little bit nerve-wracking when you go further and further back and you're remaking something that was from the PS1 days. So as far as quality of life and artistic interpretation of the environments and how the game looks, how it feels, when you're going that far back, there's a lot of liberties and, again, interpretation for how it should look on modern hardware 20 plus years later, right? So again, Bloober team did well with Silent Hill 2, but Silent Hill 1 will definitely be something worth paying attention to. More so, too, if I don't know if PlayStation's interested in doing more timed exclusivity or something. That was not mentioned at all, but that also wouldn't really surprise me, considering that worked out quite well with them for Silent Hill 2. Now, another live stream we can mention and kind of go right past here is the Death Stranding 2 premiere event that took place Sunday evening, which was about an hour long, very much that panel style of Kojima talking a lot about DS2, showing a lot of gameplay clips, things like that. I'll admit, I kind of skimmed through it. It's one of those things where the game is coming out very soon, so while it makes sense that they're doing so much talking about the game, very similar to what Kojima did with DS1 back in the day. But I don't know about you, it's one of those media blackout things. The game is coming very soon, so there are a lot of things you can see in that event, but otherwise, I think if you were already locked in on buying the game, you don't necessarily need to see this much more of it, I would argue, but there is a lot to digest if you are interested. We did see DS2 also show up at Summer Game Fest, which we'll just segue to that as well, because that was pretty early into the SGF live stream where we saw those two characters. So they're named Neil and Lucy, and Kojima did explain that Neil is very analogous to Cliff from DS1, where they were played by Mads Mikkelsen, which I think was kind of the safe expectation for this character when we first saw him in that 8-10 minute plus trailer that we saw last time. So he's probably going to have this through line throughout the story where you run into them occasionally or see more of them, and then it kind of intertwines or connects at a certain point. But that's what's going on there. That was really the only SI announcement at SGF, so we did not see this God of War 2.5D Metroidvania style game. That doesn't mean it's not coming. I would think that's probably something later this year. We know Sony does like talking during the TGAs or holding other state of plays, which are surely going to happen. So even though there was not much here for SIE, presumably they will still show up later down the road. But the rest of SGF was, I don't know, it wasn't bad for me. I would say it was definitely on the lower end of the totem pole for stacking up the Xbox Game Showcase and also the state of play. But and we can't talk about every single game announcement, obviously, but we will do some call-outs here. Mortal Shell 2 looked really interesting. Sonic Racing Cross Worlds with those, crossover characters. Big surprise that Joker is showing up yet again in another thing, so that was neat to see. Mouse PI for Hire. This game always stands out when they show another trailer or they have something to say. In this context, it's a different character where you've got Troy Baker just getting more work in the business, so not entirely surprising there, but man, this game with its grayscale cartoon style, it sticks out like a sore thumb, which is really hard to do, I'd argue, nowadays in the sort of saturation of the business. The Lies of P Overture Shadow Drop, that's always great having some Shadow Drop content coming out, especially for a game that I think I don't know if caught a lot of people off guard is the right way to put this, but it seems as though a lot of folks did really enjoy Lies of P more than what we initially were expecting before that game came out. Also, Mina the Hollower, that is a game that is right up my alley, and I will admit, obviously have to be a little bit biased here because of Yacht Club Games, and shout out to Celia, but man, it is still such a wonderful top-down Zelda-inspired game where the demo is available right now, and we have a confirmed date, October 31st, so love to see that. The Deadpool VR game was very silly to see. You all know, still love my VR. It just sucks that unfortunately that was skipping PSVR 2, and it got an audible laugh out of me when they joked about how Insomniac got Spider-Man, but he got this, which was it was goofy. It leaned very much into the Deadpool universe and just that ridiculous fourth wall breaking humor. I think my standout for the show, honestly, was not Resident Evil Requiem, which may not be a surprise to all of you. You know I'm not a huge Resident Evil fan, but that was, of course, kind of insane to have this like slight tease a third into the show where they're like, oh, we need more time for the game, and then like 20 minutes later they just do the formal reveal. Everyone was expecting we would eventually see RE9 at this weekend, rather, whether it's the State of Play or SGF. Everyone thought for sure this thing was going to show up. So it was a very brief fake out, but still really fun to see. And it looks like they are taking the franchise in not a different direction, but one where like you can do first and third person. It seems like they're pumping a lot of money into it. And there's just been a crazy amount of enthusiasm for Capcom nowadays because they've just been doing incredibly well. Having said all that, the thing that stuck out to me the most was Ill, which was this, incredibly violent-looking game. It's been announced and in development for years, but this was a really solid put-together trailer where it shows that first-person horror, the crazy dismemberment, the sort of body dysmorphia, and gosh, I'm still thinking about that trailer. I genuinely hope it looks even remotely close to what we just saw there. It looks insane. So there was that. And I guess like the Splitgate 2 reveal was also rough, obviously, in hindsight, given that they're, going out of their way to say like, oh, we want to make something different and make FPS great again. Then it's like, oh, we've got a Battle Royale game. So that was silly, obviously. But otherwise, SGF it's low on the totem pole for me, but that's not to say it was bad. I will say, very happy for those that are really enjoying what they saw for RE Requiem. And having a date on that game too, February 27th, 2026, and knowing that it seems like they're very confident they're going to hit that date, that's got to feel good for an RE fan. Moving on to the Xbox Game Showcase, where this was a very important live stream for a PS5 owner, and that this is now the first Microsoft live stream where they have no problem showing PS5 logos at the end of their trailers. So now there's full transparency on what is and is not coming over, and in this case, the list of games that are not coming is smaller than the ones that are, so that's actually the easier way to approach this, is that the two games that are not coming for the time being is Double Fine's Keeper, which is coming out October 17th, which is a very quirky Double Fine looking game, and then In Exile's Clockwork Revolution, which that was actually the game of the show for me. It looks incredible as far as like how different that game is from what In Exile has done previously, and I'm also just a sucker for the steampunk vibe, the very clearly Bioshock inspired gameplay, so it looks fantastic. It was a very strong showing, and those games are not coming. Everything else is though, so PC, Xbox, PlayStation 5, very few Switch 2 logos obviously, which I think is simply more a byproduct of how Nintendo likes to do things, so it's not to say these games are not coming to Switch 2, or Switch 1 for that matter, but they'll probably talk about that more during their own direct whenever they end up doing that. But I will say for the other two games, it's not like those won't come to PS5 eventually either. I would think it's very similar to like Machine Games with Indiana Jones, and that it could simply be a consequence of the whole amending the deal and then going back on it and then working on the PS5 build. Maybe there's just not that many resources, or it's in the pipeline to comfortably work on every version of the game, or how far along a PS5 build is. I mean, in context, it would still make sense that they would prioritize PC and Xbox first and then do PS5 down the road. So I would think they're going to come eventually, but in this case, for the time being, it's PC, Xbox only, and then of course everything was like Xbox Play Anywhere and Game Pass and this, that, and the fourth. So it was still nice though to watch it and see most of the stuff is confirmed. For example, Persona 4 Revival did have a formal reveal as well. We had all the voice actors pretty much spill the beans on that, and this reveal wasn't even that... there wasn't much substance. You didn't really see a whole lot. But also in the context of Persona, Microsoft did that very weird thing where it was like a 72-hour embargo where Atlas could not confirm the other platforms. So there's no sense in doing that anymore nowadays anyway. So yeah, confirmed for PS5. The other thing we can point out is Gears of War Reloaded. So a beta is going on this weekend. If you're on PlayStation 5, the way to get access is to pre-order the game. So that's also really cool because that's now the first time where you can play Gears of War properly on PlayStation hardware. And there is a disc print confirmed for that game as well, which it does appear as though the full game will be on the disc. I certainly hope so. And then throughout the rest of the live stream, I mean, the kind of silly thing was towards the end, you had that one more moment announcement, but it was Call of Duty Black Ops 7. So it's like they have Activision now. They have to announce that game every year, so I'm not sure that was really all that surprising or really exciting, unless you're really into Call of Duty, but there is that. What's maybe more noteworthy here, however, is the slight tease that Phil Spencer included towards the end of the live stream, which was next year celebrating 25 years of Xbox, which now is also very applicable to a PS5 owner. And so Phil was talking about how next year they will celebrate 25 years of Xbox with what appears to be the 4 big heavy hitter Xbox properties. So he calls out Fable, the next Forza, Gears of War E-Day, and, quote, the return of a classic that's been with us since the beginning. And that very much does lean into this ongoing rumor on the Halo Xbox side of things, which is a Halo Combat Evolved remake in Unreal Engine 5. And I would think that is indeed going to be coming to PlayStation 5, either day and date or maybe a little bit after. Ironically, we also have an adjacent rumor here of some kind of back-end data mine that appeared from somebody where there's now the suggestion that perhaps Halo will appear even sooner on PlayStation. John thinks that is Halo Infinite, which would also be maybe not super surprising, but I would have thought that they might have just skipped Infinite, but I don't follow Halo news too closely, so perhaps that does make more sense than it would to me. But either way, we're still in that period. Games are coming over. Not everything is going to happen immediately, but otherwise, it was a strong first showing. It's whether you like it or not, they own a lot of studios now, right? They're a big publisher. And so we now have to pay very close attention to Xbox live streams, knowing that a lot of these things will be making their way over to PlayStation 5. Now, the other Xbox game showcase announcement we can talk about is The Outer Worlds 2, which they spent a lot of time showing off the game. It does look good. It's not bad at all. But the conversation has understandably shifted to the confirmed MSRP of the game, which is indeed our second game that is going to be priced at $79.99 USD. And, I think I speak for a lot of people when you look back at that Microsoft press release where they did very much give that transparency of this holiday season, we will be pricing some games to $80, that it would be this game. I think everybody was thinking, oh, okay, so Call of Duty. The annual game, which is a huge resource hog, multiple studios, takes a lot of money to pump out that game every year. I don't think anybody was expecting this game. And that's not a knock at the studio or what they showed. Again, it was a very strong showing for that game. I think if you enjoyed the first one, you're going to get a lot more of that in the second one. And the game's not out either, right? So who's to say it won't, command that price tag in a way that really shocks people, and it's big and there's so much to explore and do, and, there's just something really engaging that really is worth that price tag. And I say that very carefully, given that nobody's happy with the game being priced upwards of $80 now, having that new ceiling. In light of Mario Kart World, for example, I myself bought that game like a lot of other people did because it's sort of that launch title that you get for a Switch 2 if you're going to buy a Switch 2. And the game is big and large, and people are genuinely enjoying it, knowing that game is going to be supported from Nintendo for the next 8-something years. And maybe that's the kind of title where arguably you go, okay, that's, I get it. It's a really tough thing to say. I think a lot of people are expecting it was going to be $50, $60, 70 worst case scenario, because to the publisher's credit, we are seeing a lot of publishers explore that price spectrum of Split Fiction is 50, Clair Obscur is 50, some come out at 60 like Astrobot. Not everything is guaranteed to be 70 or in some cases now 80, but this I would say was definitely kind of shocking, and it sucks for the studio because they don't set the price, the publisher does. So it's like kind of that rock in a hard place where even Randy Pitchford was, of like, well, it's really out of my hands, and he's just trying to save face by putting out statements that don't really sit well with people, but he's still nonetheless trying to make that point of like, we're going to try and make the best game we can. We don't set the price though. So it sucks. I will also add this rant too of the game is going to have a disc print, but apparently the placeholder box art already has that disclaimer of internet required. The game's not coming out till October. What, you're telling me you're already sort of submitting to the idea that you're not going to print the full game on the disc? It's just so it's so infuriating. Are you kidding me? Microsoft, print the full games on the disc. Give your studios the time to get a solid gold master and print it on the disc. That seems to be the case for Gears of War, I hope, but the game's not coming out till October. Why are we already putting that on the box art? It's just drives me nuts. So if anything, that's like another tough sell for this game at 80. Like, everyone's kind of sitting here going, oh, cool, I'll play the game when I eventually can get it for much, much cheaper. Or in the case of what Microsoft is willing to propose, which is get the game on Game Pass. Now, the other Xbox Game Showcase announcement that happened was the ROG Xbox Ally and the ROG Xbox Ally X. I hate saying that. It is so wordy, but the rumors and the images we saw prior, we all knew this thing was real. So confirmed during the showcase, it's going to be in partnership with Asus, and this is going to run Windows, but it's going to boot into a full screen Xbox UI. It's principally still a ROG Ally, so it's not playing the entire Xbox One and Series library, but it is accessing PC Game Pass, Xbox Cloud, and Xbox Play Anywhere titles. So there is a vast range of Xbox-oriented software that you can play on this, and that's the sales pitch Microsoft is making, calling this Xbox hardware. This is an Xbox, which, in their view, they're considering anything on Xbox if it can access the Xbox Cloud, and things like that. And there's a lot of like splitting hairs arguments going on right now as far as like, is this genuine Xbox hardware or not? I find that really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I mean, we did have that recent report that Microsoft sort of sidelined or canceled their own in-house Xbox hardware. Arguably, that is kind of what you would consider genuine Xbox hardware. But again, I digress, because their whole shtick right now is these sort of, more of the software focus, making this hybrid Windows platform that is just going to include other manufacturers, and it's going to be a lot more like a PC in that it can load a storefront like Steam and thus launch any game you want in your Steam library. And yes, it was confirmed that the ROG Xbox Ally can launch PlayStation Studio software, because why wouldn't it? It's basically a ROG Ally. So that's the news story, which I don't think there's really much news here to go over. It's similar to what we've said in the past as far as like, could Sony block it? Do they want their games to be blocked? What does this mean for the next mainline Xbox hardware if the focus really is more on, this Windows software approach, and it is very PC-like, and you can just launch Steam, and that then by proxy means you're going to have God of War and Horizon and all these PlayStation epics that will be, without Sony's consent, playable on next-gen Xbox hardware. But the point I made before is that I don't think they can discriminate. Steam is also a private company, or Valve rather. They're not beholden to shareholders. They're not going to bend over or lean over to anybody as far as allowing a publisher to, discriminate on hardware and what kind of hardware their games can launch on. I don't think there's any sort of viable path here. If there is, I'd be very surprised as far as like how Sony could approach it. I'm also not entirely sure if they're concerned that much in the grand scheme of things. I mean, maybe they are. Maybe they're still very aggressive in that approach of making sure that their software is so boutique and it sticks to the PlayStation name. They'll obviously ship on PC, no problem, but they still don't necessarily want it to be able to launch on what feels like competitor hardware. But I don't think there's really something they can do outside of just straight up not shipping PC games anymore. But I digress, because I think that we're all kind of saying things that there's a good chance that it leans a certain direction, but we just simply don't know until we get there. So having said that, the ROG Xbox Ally is indeed a thing. It's basically a ROG Ally, and sure, you can launch PlayStation games on it. I don't think Sony's really that concerned with it right now. Perhaps they would be by the time it's another mainline home console from Microsoft, but that remains to be seen. Now, in other handheld news, we also have a very big update for the ongoing rumor of Sony working on a local play PlayStation Portable that would be pretty much around the same time as PlayStation 6, so it would essentially be a PS6 portable that would come out either the same time or shortly after, and that would be around 2027, potentially 2028. But we did hear a lot about what Sony is potentially doing right now to prepare your current software library for this portable. So over on their YouTube channel, Moore's Law is Dead, they claimed developers right now are being briefed on a new low energy mode for the console. So this would be a new performance flag where studios could make a game on PS5 and there could be a base PS5 setting, PS5 Pro, and now a low energy mode. And this mode would limit the console to 8 threads, reduces 3D audio processing to 75%, it reduces the GPU core clocks by 10 to 20%, it cuts GDDR6 memory bandwidth in half, it limits the CU count to 36, turns off PSSR, turns off VR, and all of this is meant to reduce the power consumption by 20 to 30%, and this would still maintain about 90% of the console's capabilities. Now, shortly after this live stream from Moore's Law, Kepler_L2 responded to this on Twitter, saying it's 100% an emulated performance profile for the handheld, since the biggest weakness of the APU is memory bandwidth. Now, we also had Kepler discussing the AMD product roadmap on NeoGAF, stating that as of right now, the only AMD handheld with AI upscaling anytime soon is the PlayStation handheld. And they also touched on other particulars about the device, like the total cache and the type of microarchitecture it would be, which again, it's either RDNA 5 or UDNA, whatever AMD ends up calling it. But for the most part, it would seem as though this is Sony preparing the software library right now for a device that's coming out in 2-3 years. Whenever it does come out. I mean, I know a lot of people think like 2028 feels right. Based on the tape-out period that Kepler outlined a few months ago, it actually does appear as though 27 is when it would happen. But that's not really important. It's just a matter of whenever PlayStation 6 does come, it very likely is going to have this sort of, I guess, companion handheld, but maybe not companion, because if they mandate support for this handheld, where if you're a developer and you're going to make a PS6 game, it has to have the portable profile on there as well. So you'd have base PS6 and then a portable setting. Then eventually you'd have PS6 Pro and what forth, right? So you've got these performance flags. If they mandate that, though, then basically the portable PS6 could be your PlayStation 6, you know, because it wouldn't have its own dev environment. You'd still have all the software play just fine. So there's really no pressure for that to be an extension device. It could just be the PlayStation 6 you choose to buy. That's the other thing, too. When we consider what Sony could build by the time this comes out, it's not going to have the kind of headroom to do PS5 era stuff on its own. I mean, that's why the rumor is suggesting that they're having this foresight of creating a low energy profile that in the here and now studios can start leaning into and make sure that their title is going to run without major hiccups on this new handheld, and that's good. And I would think this is sort of a retroactive thing as well for games that are not patched and they're not going to have a native low energy mode. So, you know, as the rumor suggested, there's still a 90% compatibility for the software library in this low energy mode. So Sony might already be validating the PS5 library right now to make sure that all this software is playable on this sort of high-end device by 2027. You know, when we talk about what kind of APU they can put in it, thermals, memory, you know, all that stuff. I mean, you can get PS5 era games in a portable environment, but I think it's safe to say you're not going to see Sony do an $800 to $900 bulky portable PC like we do have right now. That's why, you know, it's viable. You're seeing these games play on a Steam Deck or a ROG, But by the time Sony does a portable, it's going to be very similar to a Switch 2, in that it'll be nice, sexy looking, it'll be sleek. It will be not nearly as expensive, although I think Sony will have no problem pricing this thing maybe upwards of the same price as PS6 or perhaps slightly below PlayStation 6, because again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a companion device. It will basically be a standalone PlayStation 6, therefore it can command a PlayStation 6 price tag if you perhaps want to play your games portably instead of on the home console. And it's the same thing as, you know, when you buy a cross-buy game today. You get the game on both systems because it's basically a PS6. But it's interesting that that's the approach. I mean, and it's cool. I like that foresight, though, to know that, okay, they're sort of deploying this low energy mode right now. Studios are being briefed on it. It's optional, so they don't necessarily have to do it. Whenever a mandate does come into play, I think that will be more telling in that the commitment is there to release this thing, and they want to make sure that the vast majority of software from PS4, and I think most of the PS4 stuff was already kind of a given, but PS4, PS5, and then a hard mandate for PS6 stuff. And so you have that full local play, expensive but very premium feeling handheld. Which I'll tell you, now that we have the Switch 2, that is my sort of immediate thought when I was playing the Switch 2. It's a great experience. I love it. I think it's an excellent piece of kit. But I can't help but sit there and think of the possibility of a local play PlayStation 6. And I think Sony could make something that appears very attractive to a handheld buyer, especially somebody that is deeply committed to the PlayStation Network, and they have a lot of software on PSN. So this was a very good rumor to hear about because it does suggest that Sony is trying to be on top of software compatibility. Moving on to our next news story, it's pretty well known nowadays that the PlayStation Store is notoriously difficult for getting a refund because if you so much as download a game, you are already invalidated from getting a refund. But in very rare cases, Sony will make an exception. The big high-profile one was Cyberpunk 2077, where the game came out in a very rough state, and so Sony was willing to take refunds for that game. And now we're seeing that happen again for the recent release of MindsEye, where this game is kind of a performance nightmare. A lot of crazy bugs and issues that people are reporting. The frame rate is awful, and it seems like folks are reporting success from PlayStation support, where they're offering refunds despite downloading and playing the game, which is indeed a very rare case. If it keeps happening to the point where we hear more success stories, it might just be an internal bulletin where the support staff just has the go-ahead to grant that refund without any sort of pushback if they do get that one coming in. The studio has already acknowledged the problems. They're going to try and get a patch out as quickly as possible, but it also seems like a very sort of run-of-the-mill, not very outstanding game. Mediocre would maybe be the way to put it. But this does not happen often, I will say that. And in a weird, sadistic way, after all this stuff came out about the game, now I feel more inclined to play it. So I had zero interest in MindsEye, but now I keep hearing all this stuff, and I'm like, maybe I should get a disc and see just how much of a dumpster fire this thing is and go for a platinum or something. I don't know, but either way, if you did run into this issue with MindsEye, if you did buy the game, just know that you will be probably able to get a refund through PlayStation support if you do attempt it. It doesn't seem like a massive bulletin like it's always granted right now, but you can certainly try it, and you might have some success. Next up, I did not think we would have this story again, but sure enough we do, which is Black Myth Wukong and did Sony pay for exclusivity on this game? I'm shocked it got to this point, but in fairness, it was a coincidence that doesn't look good, which is the game is now confirmed for Xbox Series S and X, and it's coming out August 20th. Now, the problem is that actually is exactly 1 year after the game came out on PS5 and PC. So that does directly align with typical exclusivity arrangements of, 1 year, 2 years. But that also is highly dependent on if that studio can get the port ready in time. We have seen plenty of issues where, or rather just circumstances of Sony securing exclusivity, they put a date on it so you know when it can go over, but let's say it just simply doesn't for another 6 months to a year, because while the contract on paper says it can't go anywhere else, before that date, they might not have that version ready to go. In other cases, they do, and it ships immediately, sometimes without us even, realizing that was the date where it was lifted, and it shows up on other platforms, right? So that does happen. But this date in particular apparently is very special to Game Science because they've actually been using it for years. When they announced the game in 2020, when they've done separate trailer drops, it's thematic to the game because I guess it represents the birthday of Sun Wukong. And as a reminder, we had that one thing pop up 5 months ago where the game director said very much openly that it was tough to optimize the Series S version of the game. They made that post on Weibo. So it's kind of funny how this came up again because people are still heavily convinced that Sony paid for exclusivity. I mean, it does kind of just feed into the console war nonsense, and you all know I can't stand that stuff. But it was the kind of coincidence where it doesn't, it looks a certain way. Having said that, it's the same thing that should always be said surrounding this game. It just was not treated like an exclusive at all, and Sony's not shy to make those kind of arrangements where they sort of present it in a very transparent way, and there's usually a marketing tie-in as well. I mean, I think people are taking these massive leaps of logic here to go, there's different exclusivity arrangements, and it sometimes doesn't include marketing. It's like, okay, let's just give it a rest. Historically, it's not hard. You look back, an exclusive from PlayStation is very much outlined as so. In this case, the date did not really help, and Microsoft PR saying on 2 or 3 different occasions that it was an arrangement when it wasn't also did not necessarily help the way that this game was presented. But again, very likely not an exclusive. Moving on to some very good news for the video game actor strike, which is after 11 months of negotiations, a tentative agreement has been reached. And so as of right now, since June 11th, the strike is declared over, and so workers can get back to work. Right now, there is still a vote that has to be sent out for ratification by the union's membership, but otherwise everything should be good to go. So that is great to see, because the one major issue they were still stuck up on was AI protections. That was the thing they could not meet eye to eye on with all the negotiating parties. So considering they've now reached a deal, means that they have the protections they need to continue serving this industry. Next up, we have another example of Shuhei Yoshida yet again doing some talking and making a big reveal on a game that could have been, but obviously did not transpire, and this time around it is Jumping Flash. So recently he was speaking with VGC for an interview that has not been published just yet, but they did post this as a separate story where he did confirm that Jumping Flash was something they were looking at. So he said, and I quote here, "Some developers wanted to license Jumping Flash to develop it into a part of their new VR game. One of those that actually happened was the original creator of Fantavision asked for the license and remade it into VR." And that did happen. Fantavision 2020X or something, whatever it's called, that came out for PS5, PSVR 2. That actually does predate the other licensing agreements they're doing now, where they're letting these games go to Switch with, Patapon and Freedom Wars and Everybody's Golf. So there was Fantavision. That one does stand out. But it's cool to know that, we almost got Jumping Flash, which is also a very, very old classic PS1 game. One of the earliest sort of, PlayStation exclusives that really sort of stands out and has that identity for itself, and it has roots in what is a very early 3D technical demonstration on PlayStation hardware. So it would have been really cool to have that in VR. Although I will say, Jumping Flash in VR, boy, that would have been tough. That for motion sickness, which I'm still kind of tough with, even though I've got my VR legs for the most part. Ooh, Jumping Flash, I think that would have been kind of tough to sit through, but I'm sure that's one of many other games that could have been. And since Shuhei's just an open book, I'm sure we'll find out what they are at some point, because my lord, this man has been doing some talking. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. Follow the link down below or scan the QR code, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are some of the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all. And we had no Tuesday video, so didn't really have anything ready to go in time. And, you know, again, I was out of town, so that was all well and good. But coming up, we do actually have the SIE business segment briefing going live in a few hours, actually. So I did have to prepare the show a little bit earlier. I think what we're going to do is simply LTPS, and then separately, we will have a discussion on the business segment briefing as well. So you might just have two videos today. That's probably how it's going to work out. So there's that, and then I'll probably have something on Tuesday for you as well. But otherwise, that is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.